because the autopsies showed that these 6 were killed, executed basically, being shot in the head at close range, and also because of the notion that 4 of the 6 had the possibility, at least 3 of the 6, but maybe even 4 of the 6 would have been in the first phase of a negotiated hostage release and ceasefire deal, they would have been released. Now let's just go back over those dates. A proposal was put forward in April. Israel put forward a proposal in May. It was adopted by Joe Biden and the UN Security Council. Hamas agreed to it in July, and nevertheless, there is no deal. And that and the fact that in the past 2 weeks, 13 hostages have been rescued. That is 1 rescued alive, 12 returned in body bags. And those numbers are terrifying for the Israeli public, for the relatives of the hostages. And I guess what the public is saying now to their politicians is, we want this return of hostages to be prioritised. It's important to us. And, you know, we want you, the government, to act on that. Joe Biden, the US president, said that Hamas pulled the trigger and is plainly to blame for the death of these 6 hostages. I guess what the Israeli public is asking is, what role did its own government play?
Indeed, and as you say, this could really be a turning point for the public in Israel. But what about the politicians, and crucially, what about for Benjamin Netanyahu himself? Could this be a turning point for them?
We don't know the answer to that. You know, they've been holding pretty steadfast to the line, Benjamin Netanyahu's line, and his right-wing allies as well, that you don't reward Hamas, who's just killed 6 hostages, by doing a deal with them, that kind of talk, that these actions during a time of war, these protests, this strike, it's highly unusual, it's damaging for the public, they call for it to stop, but the public is calling on them to act. And I think you're seeing that rift perhaps for the first time. It's been a long war, a long, hard war for the people of Gaza, certainly, but for the people of Israel as well. We're also seeing an escalation of the border with Lebanon in the West Bank, certainly within the last 6 weeks. And I guess what's being asked here is this government carrying out something that is strategically successful for the state of Israel? And there are many former military, serving military leaders, security service leaders, who are beginning to question that, as well as the public.
Iris, thanks so much for that. That's the France 24's Jerusalem correspondent, Iris Mackler. Well, let's come back to France now, where pressure's piling on President Emmanuel Macron to name a new prime minister and end almost 2 months of political deadlock after France's inconclusive snap election.
WESN.
It's the start of the new school term, and of course, you felt it. You felt it on the nation's roads this morning if you've already traversed our road networks. Fortunately, my commute was short, so it did not take too much of an adjustment for me. I could only feel sorry for those who have to wake up significantly earlier to start their day significantly earlier, because at the end of the day, we don't necessarily progress on certain things that we take for granted. There are a lot of things that we potentially take for granted because we just assume that they will be given to us, or we assume that they are benign. Case in point, we take communication for granted. Now, George Bernard Shaw is quoted to have said, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." And I think to some extent that potentially encompasses a lot of what goes on in TNT. The frustration that certain leaders, certain prominent figures have when they feel as though they are being ignored. But what they don't understand is not that they're being ignored, it's that the interpretation that they intended is not always the one that is interpreted. particularly when they themselves try to minimize what they say and lead us down a path as though we're 2-year-olds holding daddy or mommy's hand and not fully grasping the fact that at the end of the day, you cannot treat a voting population, the news media that informs them, and other civic leaders and stakeholders who will have opinions on things. You cannot treat them like children. That is not how a democracy works. That is, to some extent, how other forms of government, less free, work, but that, ironically, and I would say unintentionally, undermines the whole point of democracy. But this taking communication for granted, I think, is it's a real phenomenon that not only is being taken for granted by politicians, but I think by far too many people. Even I myself might be the one talking about these things, pointing it out, and falling for some of the same mistakes. It's not impossible. I wouldn't know if I did it. Someone will have to tell me. Sometimes I am told that on our call-in segment. The thing is, and the internet has made this harder, so some might argue that things were better before the internet. Maybe, maybe not, because mass media at the end of the day existed. The form has just changed. And irresponsible behavior could come from any source that is eventually, or could be traced back to, the control of a human. But a couple of other quotes. The most dangerous untruths are truths moderately distorted. And that, I think, is something that should be appreciated more in 2024. Reality is one that we perceive based on what we're told, so you don't outright lie, you just smudge the truth a little to kind of nudge the narrative in the direction that you want. You don't force it, you just give it a little pat on the back. And it's more believable to as many people as possible. Because at the end of the day, there will always be someone who disagrees, therefore choose not to believe. And you need to go after, this is in full cynicism, I'm not saying that I condone this, but you go after the people who are undecided, who are easier to persuade. And we'll see that, or we see that, I think, a lot in ethical debates, that people are very much binary on. They take a hard position one way or the other. Particularly, I think, at times when I myself look at both sides of the argument and I say that both sides have gone too far, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the other things that I think, that's on a wider scale. Now, ideologically, I keep an eye on international politics because that's where you see ideologies, ideas, strategies get debated. Sometimes proven right, sometimes proven wrong. It all depends on how you interpret or define success, the data, whatever. But one of the things that I think is very much important, another quote, when the trust account is high, communication is easy, instant, and effective. I think that is very much pertinent here. Now, in other parts of the world, you see a divide on ideological differences, but here, what you see is the government of the day being unpopular because of controversy, and the opposition being, to some extent, considered to be just as bad. There is no ideological difference to make a clear line of separation for people who have certain issues to say, this is who I'm going to support or that. Because on a lot of issues, both parties at the end of the day kind of take similar stances. And we have the interesting phenomenon where in other parts of the world, conservatives will not trust liberal politicians. Liberals, that is to say voters, will not trust conservative politicians. But here, It's not quite that simple. And arguably, the reverse of this quote, the implication of this quote is that the reverse is also true. When your trust account is high, communication is easy, instant, and effective. Therefore, when your trust account is low, communication is difficult, a long process, inefficient, and all too often ineffective. But I think it's inefficient first because it's not impossible. You just have to put the effort in, and I don't see that. What I see is effort being put into crafting a narrative with selective references, selective details, selective analysis. That's what we get mainly from politicians. Another word for selective analysis and details and selective communications and selective facts is spin. But again, moderately distorted. We'll defend Alan Warner against the crazy allegations that have no substance, at least as of yet. We don't necessarily speak about the other things because it's before the court, so we're not going to speak about it. But we'll make it sound as though he's such an upstanding citizen. In this case, it might cause people to not necessarily have questions about the other cases. But of course, this is one that most of you should know, most of you should have heard before. And perhaps it's a key to what is not being done. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. It's an old quote. And now we have to wonder, to what extent are the most prominent speakers in society truly listening? Because it seems to me that they're kind of just going off on their own. The only thing that they care about is the amount of votes they get in a general election. And right now, there's a disconnect between what the population wants to say, or wishes it would say in some cases, because we don't actually say it. We don't actually say it in any formal or official capacity. We just say it while we line with the boys. We say it in the rum shops. We don't actually tell our leaders the important things. Tobago did. They got change. But to some extent, it's born from the fact that they also potentially do not listen when things are being said. And it makes my question, to what extent do our leaders really live in a different country to most of the population, where they don't have to suffer through the things most of you, and to some extent because I'm not going to lump myself into that category. But I could be completely wrong. I might be further into that category, that I think it's an all-encompassing thing of people who are suffering. I'm not suffering, so I won't say that I am. I won't try to artificially get that sympathy. But the point is, to what extent is the suffering being ignored? Because we have an entire parliament of Marie Antoinettes who are essentially saying some version of, if they're starving, let them eat cake and go about their day. The only thing is we are far too laissez-faire to have a French Revolution. And it's not as though we have France 24 because we want to encourage that, but take the violence out, but bring the resistance, or not. And then we'll see where we go. Because as it stands right now, I'm underwhelmed to some extent. But I'll take what I could get with regards to the messaging from our leaders, and we'll go over that and more with today's Daily Review. All right, so of course we had Independence this weekend. We had all of the celebrations on Saturday and the parade and the fireworks were really loud. And weren't we supposed to have soundless fireworks? Shout out to all of those who are concerned about noise pollution, because I found it was somewhat ridiculous. What about drone shows? Because I don't think fireworks are necessarily cheap, and the irony with drones is you might be able to use it more than once a year and potentially for more than one function. But soundless fireworks. Anyway, that's besides the point. Of course, the nation celebrated. Some people might say, what's there to celebrate for? We've had people dying over the weekend. Some from violence, some maybe from suicide, some trying to save their family members from drowning. Condolences to that family. It's very unfortunate, but at least there's a small silver lining there with regards to the bravery and sacrifice of one man for those that he loved. But with that said, what also came out of Independence Day? Messaging. Because, and I've brought this up before, every time we have one of these things, you know, Eid, Easter, Christmas, Diwali, we get, you know, the messaging. Usually it's words that don't even indicate anything practicable that's actionable in the moment if coming from those with the authority to do so. And coming out of this weekend, I find that the messaging, well, there's three in particular. There's more than three, but for this first story, there's three in particular I want to focus on, and I call it the good, the bad, and the underwhelming. It wasn't ugly. I didn't want to call it ugly, but it was underwhelming. But before we get to the good, let's go to the bad. The bad is, I don't know what the opposition leader was thinking when she thought that for her, and I don't know if this is the full extent of the message, but I'm focusing on one, what I think is a big part, where she's calling out against globalization because this is independence and we are being controlled previously by other nations, now by global corporations and international oversight bodies, particularly through the financial, food, medical, energy, and IT sectors. I have disagreed. You might not necessarily have caught on to it, but I have disagreed to similar sentiments like this coming from other speakers with other perspective, from other points of origin, for lack of a better way to put it. I'm not going to agree with things like this now, particularly when, what is this message? Well, first off, this message is who to blame. They control us, blame them. That's what it is. This is basically saying, oh, it's not your fault, you know, it's their fault. It's their fault. We're not really independent. Because, you know, foreign governments and companies and conglomerates, they control our oil and gas money. Ironically, to some extent, there's a minor implication in this statement that says, don't blame the PNM for the bulk of the 60 years. Some people do. I don't necessarily want to. I think that's an oversimplification. But some people want to blame the PNM. They were in power the most, right? Well, this message kind of says, don't necessarily blame the PNM because they weren't actually in control. Other people were in control. No one just magically did nothing about it now. But here in 2024, I will point it out. I'm pretty sure we had control over our finances. We had control over our accounts. We had our negotiators take deals. Other countries, it all depends on your position. It all depends on your leverage. It all depends on what do you have. Does the other people want it? I mean, to some extent, I don't really see how we have been controlled. Where is the American world police to deal with our crime situation since we are but a puppet? Ironically, I would like more foreign help and intervention with regards to certain aspects of law enforcement. It's not about sovereignty. Our laws are our laws and our waters. We just need help to execute certain things, particularly once we get to the international sphere. So that's initially where I thought the opposition was going this. But when she said globalization, she wanted to decry globalization. All right, globalization also, whether we like it or not, we decry the amount of money we spend on foreign food. But the point is, it was cheap. It still, to some extent, is cheap. And until we get our act together to grow our own food here, we kind of need it because it's the only source we have. The private sector has not adjusted to try to move away from that. The government has not adjusted to try to move away from that. I'm not going to blame the foreign corporations for that. I'm not. And then she goes on to talk about the WHO's influence over the global pandemic. Coerce independent nations to lock down citizens and mandate the acceptance of a vaccine. All right, first of all, I saw what happened in Italy. So that statement about coerce nations to have a lockdown, I think is irresponsible. Now, were the lockdowns implemented the best that it could have been? No. One, I can't remember his specific field in biology, but one biologist from the very beginning said, you really want this lockdown thing to work? Everywhere has to lock down at the same time. We do it for 2 weeks internationally, this is done. Okay, maybe 3, for good measure. And it's over because we stopped the transmission. But the world didn't do that, so we got what we got. China's lockdowns were initially effective in the immediate term. We didn't have a vaccine, we didn't have herd immunity, we didn't have infection spreading. That's what we needed to do until we figured it out. And then to say, listen, I get it. COVID is a very politicized issue. The problem is a significant amount of the arguments over the debate about vaccinate, don't vaccinate, lockdown, don't lockdown, mask, no mask, comes from American politics, of which both sides disappointed me heavily. Because let's not forget, the conservatives were against the vaccine and against certain COVID measures, which started under their then president, the last Republican who stood in the Oval Office. All of a sudden, they weren't for it. But just following the arguments, it appeared to me that a lot of it was just off of politics. Neither side really cared about helping people. The Democrats over-censored everything, over-compensated for certain things that everyday citizens were doing. I have no issue with people taking ivermectin during COVID, and I think the FDA had to come out and say they overstepped with regards to what they said about ivermectin. It's up to you. You want to take it, it's up to you. I didn't take it. But if people wanted to take it, so what? Make more. The price goes up. Well, all right, that's for the market to figure out. But to say that globalization is a threat, and then here's the thing about the COVID debate. So first of all, I think that it was overly political, and why are we bringing that in here? I have already gone on record to say outside of the porous borders during the lockdown of our borders, the fact that is the one failure for our pandemic response. And you could also argue, yes, the fact that some people had parties when other people weren't allowed to. That's also unfair treatment. But the borders were the biggest failure. Generally speaking, how the Ministry of Health responded and how the police service responded was fine. But why are you bringing up COVID in 2024? COVID happened. We have other problems now. What are you doing to address that? You want us to become isolationists? Okay, how do you intend to do that? How is that practical? Are we just going to magically start to sprout food and be food secure? Because you said globalization is a bad thing? Where's the practicality in this message? But again, COVID happened a couple of years ago now. We don't need to debate COVID right now. Yes, it had an effect on the economy and crime, but right now, debating how COVID was handled is not necessarily going to solve the problems right now. It's not like it's a sense of we are debating an historical issue that has yet to be addressed. COVID is technically gone. We could learn lessons from it, but right now, we cannot do anything about COVID and the effect it had on our economy and our crime levels. We just can't, and our education levels. Regardless of what we do to fix the problem, it's not anything directly to do with that situation because it is in the past. Where are the ideas to deal with the current problems whose effects are locked in? There's no way to change the effect of COVID now. They're locked in. We have to deal with the aftermath. We cannot change the consequences of COVID. We have to deal with the current situations now because they're fixed. Meanwhile, let's go to the good. Relatively speaking, complaints about their parade rehearsals and doing it during rush hour traffic, notwithstanding, from me. If nobody else did it, I complained about it. The President had what I thought was a reasonable message, generally speaking. 62 years on, the question whether we are willing to make the changes and take the steps which are required to be taken in order for us to fully realize independence is a question that our country poses to each and every one of us. It means holding up a mirror to ourselves daily and constantly and assessing our progress in creating the kind of country about which we sing in our national anthem, a country in which every creed and race finds an equal place. It requires us to face the truth about our shortcomings, even as we celebrate our gifts and our strengths. It's a positive message, but it's not one saying it's their fault, it's somebody else's fault. It's not trying to pull the wool over our eyes to say everything is fine here, more on that in a second. It's telling us, it's giving us to some degree, maybe you could argue not enough, but perhaps for Independence Day you don't want to be too negative. But I appreciate the fact that, look, what is the key point on this? Face the truth about our shortcomings. Even as we celebrate our gifts and our strengths, face the truths of our shortcomings. It's a little sugar-coated, but it's not trying to veer away from the fact that at the end of the day, we are responsible for us. The United States is not responsible for us. They will help us if we ask. They might intervene if we don't ask, in which case we look at them funny. They might not. But regardless, for the most part, 99%, it's us. We are responsible. We are an adult nation. We might be a young adult nation, but we're still adults. We don't have parents anymore, right? That's what independence means. We already were 18. We turned 18, rhetorically speaking, 62 years ago. As a nation, that's like 4 years in nation years, right? But we're adults. And at some point, adults have to face the reality, myself included, that if we fail, it's because of ourselves, not because of the man. And in part, it's a message about the nation, but also to each and every one of us. And perhaps she didn't go far enough. But again, it's Independence Day. I can't fault it for that. But I do believe that there's more bitter pill medicine that we need to swallow if we really want change. Because I find it hilarious that we lament all these problems and we say we want change, but then we don't want to take the bitter medicine. We don't want to hear the harsh reality of our lives, which are ending by the handfuls, it seems, every month, by the dozens. And last but not least, the underwhelming. Because, of course, the government's modus operandi is to essentially say, nothing to see here, everything is fine, it's all great. The headline is the Prime Minister, real prospects for a brighter future. I'm not going to say no, things can't improve. We want them to improve. I'm not saying that we should all be negative and just resign in defeat and not improve. But I am saying that this type of messaging, it's par for the course, it's business as usual, it's not necessarily constructive, it doesn't do anything for anybody, it's very ineffective, it's potentially tone deaf, and most of all, ultimately, because we have heard similar things like this every holiday, event, milestone, etc., ultimately, it has been proven to be time and time again, with each passing example, a complete and utter waste of time, except to act as proof that you are devoid of any substantial ideas in order to treat with the actual situations that are costing people either their lives or their livelihoods. President said, we have to live up to every creed and race finds an equal place. The Prime Minister saying, we set an example of racial harmony. Really? We can't even see a good example of racial harmony in Parliament. Who's setting this example? I say that knowing that I have said before, I do believe we do multiculturalism better than other places in the world. But perhaps we need to understand that's also on a curve. It's not as though a lot of, we do it that well to say we do it perfectly. We just do it better than, I think. But maybe we ourselves don't live up to the ideals that we would like to aspire to. More importantly, I don't like... It's a positive message, but unlike the president's message, it does not acknowledge, at least a sufficient enough degree that I could read, because he does mention crime, but in a manner which it's almost like if, it's just a thing that happens and we'll be okay. It's like, no. That doesn't work for the people who have already died. One family, one of their family members was kidnapped and eventually found murdered. Where is the message of hope for them? Where is the message of hope for the victims of Paria, the families of the deceased and the survivor and the people in that industry? Where is the message of hope for all of the people who've lost loved ones either to criminal activity or potentially police activity, whether rightfully or wrongfully, or not to police activity, but to other unknown elements, which at the end of the day, we have to question. We know that there are fake uniforms out there. Let's not forget that. This big unknown source of violence on the ground, the lack of consideration for human decency, for human life. Where are the words to treat to that? More importantly, when there's any tragedy with crime, we hear all the right politically correct things. We are saddened, we are devastated, we will redouble our efforts, we will leave no stone unturned. All of those, like I said, it's all proven to be talk. Because we have literally seen, over the last 2 to 3 years, no change, none, zero, zip, zilch. No change in effectiveness, no change in results. Major crimes are down, other major crimes are down. That's nice. Could someone please ask the Commissioner of Police and her executives to go to the house of every family of all the murder victims in this country and please inform them to look up, be a little bit happier, because other major crimes are reduced. Tell them that. Let them swallow that. If the victims' families can appreciate that, can accept that, then we'll accept it. All right. I'll finish up, ironically, switching gears slightly. Another message, this one coming from the Minister of Education. And this is similar to, maybe this is something we need to hear. Is it necessary or not? I'm not entirely sure if I fully want to let the minister off the hook, but of course now it's the first day of school, so one of the things is which school has failed to reopen, has not reopened fully. I know one school there in the process of reopening, so Forms 1 and 2 are going out today. The rest of the school is going out in about 2 days' time. But the Minister of Education went on to say, with regards to our education system, we must never take this for granted. What we have here in TNT is admired and desired by many countries in the region and globally. Even in your school, it may not be perfect. That in itself can teach you an important life lesson. Life is not perfect, and the most successful people in the world are those who have made it through difficulties and have achieved their goals in spite of that. Now, granted, I could be cynical here. On one hand, I have said before, a lot of the issues with the Ministry of Education is budget. And it's not that I'm saying it's all IMBIT's fault with regards to not giving the Ministry of Education enough. Across the board, we need more money, right? So it's not necessarily the government's fault for the allocation per se. Rather, overall management, yes. But in this specific example, it's just a consequence of the reality that we face. That said, there are probably things that the Minister of Education could do that are not necessarily restricted or tied down due to restrictions in her budget. With regards to how the education system is going, because people are looking at the CXC results. And people are also looking at the essentially, not necessarily the failure rate, but those who are, I can't remember what the term is here. But with the rate of those students who have done so bad that it's essentially, an insurmountable mountain unless they redo their education, reset the exams. With the worst results of the worst results, very low scoring pupils. But ultimately, I do think her message has merit. To some extent, we do take it for granted. One of the things she said is parents need to be more involved than children, which is true. We've said that. For safety, for security, but also just for their upbringing. I get it. Not everybody could afford to do so. You have a middle-income family where both parents are working long hours to try to make ends meet. I get it. I understand. It's not easy. But at the end of the day, to some extent, that's life. The needs of education, I think to some extent, we are maybe not identifying what is needed in education for children to move forward. So we just have this one-size-fits-all system, and we're seeing the cracks in that. Some of the criticism is to say maybe use AI tools to try to remedy that. I don't know if we need to rethink the wheel with new technology. I think existing techniques and technology already exist to craft lesson plans and to identify strengths and weaknesses of students. We don't need AI for that. To what extent these things can be utilized by the Ministry of Education without more funds, I don't know. I would like to think to some extent they can be, but maybe I'm wrong. But I do think we've seen it in Gates where people took the tertiary part of the education for granted. They took the free part of their tertiary education for granted. They abused the system. Parents, they take it for granted. School is free. You will mind my child for me until about 2:30, and then maybe they'll travel home. Maybe they'll take extra lessons, so I don't have to leave work. Or there's a whole host of equations where you may not realize when you're doing it, but you kind of are taking it for granted that it's just there and it will work. The irony, of course, is in my life, with my friends close to me and my own family, there are too many horror stories with regards to the education system, both public and private. And the long and short is it necessitated involvement by the parents. So as much as I don't necessarily want to hear a cop-out about who else to pass blame, and I do think that the Minister of Education could be more straight with us and could potentially be doing more, but I can't necessarily say in detail, so that's to some extent speculatory on my part. I will say that at the end of the day, don't knock some of the harsh realities of what she has to say. We could still criticize the messenger over things that are directly related to her, but the message still has some merit. There's still something to be gleaned from here. If we want things to improve, it's not just the government that's going to have to do it. Our problems they start from us. The government is just a poor interpretation of our wishes, of what we want to do to move forward. And that's why we end up where we are. It starts from us. We at least have to be included. It might not necessarily end with us, but we have to be included in the solution. Of course, you could disagree with me or not later on in the show. However, I've gone on enough without a break, so we need to take one now. When we come back, we should have the ASP here with us. Stay tuned. This is talking about WESN. Sean Michael Small, in case you forgot. This is the Content Capital, in case you forgot. Television with a difference. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
So I was just informed. Actually, he did message me, but I was not checking my messages. I was on air. The ESP is running late because of traffic, first day of school. I'll admit, I knew I had to be a little bit earlier than during the vacation, but I wasn't that much earlier. I didn't necessarily experience like that much traffic, and sometimes on the first day, it might not be as bad on the Monday or the first day, but then the second day, it could like exponentially increase all of a sudden. But no, I guess to some extent, you know, maybe the ASP forgot what school traffic is like, or just, no, people came out. It was not one of those kind of weird phenomena where not everybody goes out on the first day, but this year, no, seems like everybody's gone out to school. But also there are times when, you know, people themselves are now trying to readjust to the new schedule, the new influx of cars on the road. So that could also add to the initial traffic sometimes. But with that said, we wait for the ESP. We'll continue with the daily review. Ironically, we have more stories to come down the pipe. Didn't expect to take so long on that initial story, but what can I say? I'm a little bit upset about not necessarily the state of the country, but rather our response to it, because I don't really see us fixing it. One of the issues that is up in the air and we don't necessarily have a solution for right now complaints or accusations of extrajudicial killings. And I say it like that because I am not one to pronounce this is what is happening, the police are doing this. I get it, the public have concerns about it. Some people believe that the police are doing it. I'm not necessarily willing to go that far. Now, in the case of the Moruga triple homicide, all I will say is that case was taken to trial. I do wonder if there were some mistakes made by the prosecution to get us the result that we got, but it is what it is. But the point is the system did prosecute that case. So I'm not going to say it's easy for these things to happen and police officers who are so corrupt and so inclined will get away scot-free. But the public are looking at some of the incidents that happened, I believe, in July. They're looking at it because there was 2 multiple shootings, one with 3 dead, one with 4 dead. And the public asks questions, I get it. But to make that assumption, particularly when we know 2 things. One, we know criminal elements have had fake uniforms before. Although in this case, these 2 specific examples, I do believe that the police did take responsibility for these shootings, but I think the sentiment and the past perception or the history or the context that leads us to this point potentially includes certain incidents that reportedly were police, but we don't know for sure if they were police. Of course, we also do have situations where a soldier has been accused of being part of a home invasion. The other thing is the fact that there was the whole situation with the SSA. And again, to what extent is potentially that situation also being lumped on and included in the context of what people want to include or perceive as systemic extrajudicial killings by the police. You see, if we think the state is willing to do it in one branch, it's easier to believe they'll do it in another branch, or we might even just confuse the 2, law enforcement, police. Regardless, I want to take a step back because I'm not willing to assume the police service is doing these things. Granted, there are corrupt police officers, but to what level? How many of them are going to just decide to kill criminals because of whatever reason? It's not going to be that many of them. Nature has a way when you go that out of bounds to too much of a degree, it's hard to hide it. But the head of the police union, understandably, he's defending his members. But he did say something that rubbed me the wrong way over this situation. So, Gideon Dixon, ASP Dixon, the head of the Police Social and Welfare Association, he called out, I believe, Mr. West, David West, head of the Police Complaints Authority, saying, while West is demonizing the police for not using the body cameras, the public is glorifying the police because the public wants to get a relief from the scourge of criminal activity. Now, the second part of that statement, we've already seen where one parent basically regretted his stance and changed his tune when his son became one of the deceased in a police shooting situation. And again, I'm not blaming the police. I am just pointing to the fact that, look, these things can affect us directly because you never know when someone gets in a situation. A gunfight is a judgment call, and a loved one could be killed. They might make a bad decision. It might not have been a decision you think warrants getting shot and killed, but in the middle of a firefight, can't tell police officers, ooh, you need to make sure the intentions within the mind of that person is to be a violent criminal at this very moment. It's kind of not how a fight works. So that's one half. But the first part, that bothers me. The second part doesn't really bother me. I just wanted to highlight something. The first part bothers me. While he demonizes the police, I get it. It's to the point where it's a stereotype, it's a trope, but I believe it's one that is true. You see it with regards to American TV. Internal affairs are always demonized. They're always the enemy by the police officers who are the good guys on the TV show, right? Except usually, amongst the sheep there will be wolves, or amongst the sheepdogs there will be wolves. And it's not so clear-cut that they are the enemy and they are not to be trusted. It's an unfortunate reality. When you are the people to hold others to account, you're not going to be liked. But for the union to go so far as to say that David West is demonizing the police for not wearing police body cameras, listen, you could take issue with Mr. West's perspective and his phrasing and how he puts things across. But ditto, it can be done to you. David West has a job which I think he ironically is not doing effectively enough. I don't necessarily know why. Because too many institutions like this, and we've gone over this with Karen last week, the Ombudsman, the PCA, etc., they seem to be mostly teethless. The Office of the Procurement Regulator, mostly teethless, if not completely toothless. The union should not be trying to push back against something which technically in the long run will help exonerate its officers by saying, this is the evidence why we're innocent. Because body cameras will provide evidence to exonerate officers in questionable situations, and a strong functional police complaints authority, if they give the service a stamp of approval because they're doing their work and they're weeding out the bad apples, you know what will happen for the good officers? It will further concrete their status. It will prove to the rest of us, or give us something more substantial to say, these guys are doing the work, and we could prove it because we have checked them out, and we have weeded out the ones who are pulling them down, holding them back. And perhaps that's what maybe the police union needs to understand. They need to, not that they need to go completely the other way. I understand their position is sensitive, but they need to straddle that line a little bit better and not come across as though, because it might be a widely speculative implication, but I'm still going to throw it out there. To some extent, if you want to blindly defend all police officers, then you are indirectly, to some degree, approving of the corrupt ones doing the nonsense. And that, some people might disagree with me, the union, they should defend all their members no matter what. I am sorry. I think a union should have points where they need to act in good faith for the majority of their members who are doing the right thing, for the employer, because they need the employer to succeed, for their members to have jobs. And of course, they have a duty of care to the society, all police officers do, right? So that's our next level of responsibility. I don't think wanting to defend all members of a union trumps that duty of care that the police have to the citizens of TNT. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But again, you should want the bad ones to be gone. The fact that it can be interpreted that you don't, that's the thing. A lot of the times when I bring up things, it's not even about the reality. It's about these minor perceptions. But believe you me, people will run with it in rum shops, in private conversation. They will run with it. They will assume the worst. They will assume worse than me. I am nitpicking because I am saying the perception is things that you should not allow to be done. Do not do this to yourself, because I know people will run with it and have far worse accusations than I will. You want this police extrajudicial killing thing to be cleared up? You need a proper arm that is seen to be doing an effective job to then come out and say, we've looked into it, nothing to see here. Then the public could at least consider we need to calm down. But right now, we don't have that. We have the reverse. And I can't really say anything to convince people not to go wildly with that speculation. My hands are tied. All right, the SP is here. Let's take a break. When we come back, we will get into the start of school. Ironically, we've already started the topic. Stay tuned. Oh my God, look at the time.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of at a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
Right.
or the man has been the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement. If we don't get a professional attitude towards this,
we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
All right, a little late. You know, hopefully most of you have not had this experience, but it's the start of school, so there's more traffic on the road, and potentially a lot of people are getting used to the more traffic. So your usual time to leave home normally during school months, even that might not have been good enough depending on where you're coming from and who forgot it was the starting school day. So I do wonder if that happened to my colleague here this morning, ASP Ali, TTBS Media Ambassador. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, yeah, I am finally here. I mean, this weekend.
How was the traffic?
The traffic was from the east. It was a little was hectic coming from the east.
Okay.
Port of Spain was lighter because of the fact that majority of traffic is on the east and the south, from the south coming into Port of Spain. So
yeah, sometimes that happens where you get traffic on the highways, but it won't all the way always reach into town.
So once you get in front of it, once you get a little in front of it, it's lighter. But just like everything else, we had the Easter, we had the Independence over the weekend. We had fireworks, we had Panoni Avenue, which was everything put together. So this weekend was a lot of traffic throughout the day, throughout the weekend.
I was invited to celebrations in Tunapuna, but eventually because I live, basically I have to traverse the savannah. So it's just one of those things where I am not accustomed, if I'm in my house for Independence, to leave my house to go anywhere. Yeah. Because traffic for me that day is just, I just don't even want to try. Like, I don't want to leave my house. We stocked up with groceries just because we knew I ain't going nowhere, right? My mother brought groceries, I brought groceries because I wasn't taking that chance. I was like, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not looking to try to leave to drive around Savannah, especially with the fireworks. That traffic traditionally could be really bad.
Well, fortunately, for Trinidad and Tobago, we had little incidents. Traffic I wouldn't consider that to be any major issue because it's something
especially Independence.
It's expected, but we didn't have any challenges or any major issues as it relates to any incidents that would have caused Independence and all the activities surrounding Independence. Now we're back into the school, and there was a lot of, you would have seen a lot of children out on the avenue for the Panani Avenue.
Okay.
Because of the fact that, this might be school is open Monday.
Were you on the avenue?
Yes, I was on the avenue.
So you could say that there were children out.
There was a lot of adults and teenagers, a lot of children and teenagers
the irony is, a lot of people might have assumed, well, Panani Avenue is for old people.
No, it's not.
It's for the older people, right? For the adults and up, not for the kids.
But then, remember, the avenue itself was already active with the normal nightlife. So they had another level of it. So there was a lot. So there was a lot of persons there, but fortunately there was no incidents, and that was good. But now we're back into the somber area of school, right? And the sad reality of it now is that after all of this, after all the holidays and all the activities that would have been done in various groups for the children who was in schools and all the youth clubs, like the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service they had the youth clubs and all the programs and everything like that. Yes. We are back to school.
Yes, some of which are very good programs. Right. I would like to point out. And affordable programs.
They are, and there's a lot of I was listening to some of your comments earlier on the program. I was listening to some of the things and some of the negative aspects of policing that we also have to face, right? The conversation about the individual amount of shootings and police-involved incidents that tend to put us in a light. And our president association said that, you know, we sometimes be demonized, right? I wouldn't say that the context in which it was used is that it was not directed to any particular individual per se, but at the organization. But it's how they view some of the activities that we do, and they treat us in a particular light. But sometimes we have to look at it from a different perspective also. Yes, but no one likes to be told what to do, when to do it. But that's what the law is created. We over the year, independence was supposed to be where we became independent on our own, from a country perspective, away from the powers of colonialism, doing things on our own. But at the same time, the individuals see the executive of the parliament and the laws as colonial laws, and we are not supposed to be doing it. So how do we get away from it holistically, from colonialism, with the keep on conversation? And it just trickled down all the way. It trickled all the way down to how the society treats with certain issues, right? Laws are there to have some structure in a society. Without any type of law, we have chaos, and we have anarchy in a society. Everybody does what they want. Sometimes we can say, well, yeah, we have a very lawful, unlawful society, because we see a lot of laws being broken and people callously doing what they want, and there's no enforcement of such the laws, as some of our callers keep on saying. But that is where the law enforcement and law enforcement agencies, not Trinidad and Tobago Police Service alone, we're talking about all other agencies who have their responsibility under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago in their areas to enforce certain things. When we go to the schools, we coming from taking a group of children who might be troubled, who have challenges in their environment, which is sometimes toxic to them. Put them into a school, the police service put them into groups. And we have youth groups, and we have other groups that treat with those for a small period of time.
Yeah.
In that small period of time, they feel comfortable. They can express themselves. Then after that small period of time, they're back into the toxic environment. We have to get away from that, because there's only so much you can do with that small window that you have to carry them back into the toxic environment.
The problem is, and I've seen this in other situations before, I don't know if I really want to call them out, because I'll be calling out the institutions that provided the toxic environments, right? I do want to point out the institution that was providing them the stable environment, but I can't do that without calling out the toxic ones, right? So I won't do it. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And but I will add a caveat onto that. Now, you have admitted, and I will say this, I don't like the broad brush of all police officers. Yes, there are some who are bad, right? It's similar with teachers. I'm not saying all public servant teachers are bad or private, because there's some bad ones in private too. And there are some bad ones in public, right? I know some good ones in both cases, but I also know some bad ones, right? And it does not help that on top of the fact there will be some students who not only have to deal with the area they're living, maybe it's a bad environment to be brought up, the parents might not be involved, or might be bad parents, because that's not entirely the same thing. You no longer have the village, and then you spend 6 hours a day in school, and some of the teachers might not even be good teachers. And then, you know, it's compounded. Some of them don't even have that stability. You know, maybe they get to a police youth club, maybe they don't even reach there. You know, and in some ways, for the extracurricular activities from the police clubs, it's even worse, because now you're literally the only thing. And if you can't reach them, there might be nothing to reach them at all, and then some of them end up as criminals.
It's so true, and so this conversation that we are starting today, will extend into next week.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because of the fact that it's the opening of the school term. This first week is a transition for the new students, changing the environment.
Yeah, the Form 1,
changing the environment from a primary school level into the secondary level, and some going into a primary school.
Some will be transferring too, so their environment will change.
So the environment is changing, and then we have to treat with other activities and other situations that how our youths are being dealt with in a positive manner, where the police service youth clubs have been doing a lot of good work. There's a lot that we have been doing, and the time doesn't permit me right now, so we'll extend this for next week.
Yes.
For some of the conversation as to the good work that we are doing, because we have some tips, we have some additional information to share with the public, and as to how we keep channeling the energies, the positive energies of the children, and trying to change their environment for the future.
Now, with that said, I'll just end this with what the minister herself said. One of the few good things, the Minister of Education: be more involved. Be more involved. It helps. I do believe do we have any callers waiting currently? All right, so we'll open the phone lines now. You could call and have your say. I had some very strong opinions on even things before that. So you could call in and tell me where you agree, disagree. Maybe you, of course, may have questions for the ASP. Just remember, there may be some things that he cannot answer. Whatever happens, just please be respectful with regards to the dialogue. You know, that's how a discussion should take place. All right, so while we are waiting.
One of the conversations that was out on the public domain, and I told you earlier in previous conversation, that all the positive and the commendation that the police officers receive when the unfortunate incident involving the shooting of the individuals in the Shogunate, the Cuba area, right? All the positive and the police officers are doing the job and all kind of thing. I told you that will soon change. As you see, it is. So there's a different conversation now as to whether or not it was justified or not. And that is the reality of what we were facing in the spur of the moment.
Yeah, which is sad, because depending on the actual details of the events, it could have been a very good situation. Like, it could have been executed well. It could have been the right choices by the police officers. It could have been, you know, we don't know. And that's the problem. The perception changed, but we didn't actually get more details pertinent to change any perception per se. We have to make on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
And your guest, ASP Ali.
Morning, sir.
You both gentlemen are doing great, and you had a wonderful, strong end. Choose to say that rather than weak end. We don't want you weak at the end, but strong. All right. Sean, last week I broached the subject of culture as regards to people. It's important for us to understand that culture can also be, or is also found in corporations, right? So you have a corporate culture.
Yes.
You know, schools, you know, Bishop's High School have their own culture, for instance, it's highly known. You know, organizations, and the police also have their own culture, right? There's a global culture that is assigned to police no matter where they are policing, right? You hear about the blue wall, right? The blue wall, where police don't tell on police. And that's part of the culture of policing, is that the rotten apples within the police department, who are known by the good apples do not inform on the bad apples. One, it's dangerous to their health, because those bad apples now, you know, can, you know, do things to those good apples, such as not come to their aid when they need backup and things of that nature. So we know all of this, right? We know that, you know, the police frown on things like internal affairs. You know, this is policing the police and things of that nature. So there's a culture within the policing itself globally that needs to be interrogated. And my question to ASP Ali is, has the police organization here in Trinidad and Tobago ever taken the time to sit down and look at the culture of policing to see where it may need tweaking to give the public more confidence in police? Because remember now, police have a responsibility. They have guns. They can arrest people. They can make people's lives uncomfortable. So it is very necessary that the public be comfortable with them. Has that ever been really addressed, and is that an ongoing thing that the policing here in Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago is engaged in, interrogating their culture and tweaking it internally to ensure that it meets with public confidence and so forth? And I'll step up and let the ASP address that. Thank you.
No, it's interesting that how he brought that across. Because yes, across the world there are cultures in different organizations, and policing, even police jurisdictions across the world have their own individual cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unique to where where the police services operate from within their own country and their culture. So yes, we do in fact have systems in place, and we have been revisiting our systems in terms of the number of persons that have been placed before the court for sometimes criminal behavior. Discipline, we have disciplined a lot of officers for specific activities that is not conforming to the rules and regulations of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. But one of the things that I feel that the public doesn't really understand is that some of the disciplines and some of the situation cannot be just placed out in the open public because a person is innocent and proven guilty, whether it is an officer or not. And public perception about the officer can be misrepresented at the same time if you don't give that person a fair chance.
Yeah, because you have that issues in for non-police situations as well.
And when you are transparent in how you do certain things, transparency brings forth a lot of allegations. Because when you say a transparent organization, everything is out for you to question and judge every single action or inaction as the case may be. So yes, we have levels of transparency, so you have to be very careful with it.
This is why I regret the fact that the PCA is not viewed as a strong institution. That we could, I don't know the reality of the work that they do. I'll say that up front. But just kind of based on a combination of what we see publicly, the messaging, and the results, I can't fault, because I myself have this view, the public, of not having a great opinion of them, because I understand that there are things, because it's similar to government, there are things that you cannot reveal to the general public. So then what you need is someone who you could trust in that situation to then kind of say, things, we've looked into it, things are okay here. So the public can't know the details, but someone who can know the details, who, in the case of government, it's the opposition. In the case of the police, it's the investigative body. I just don't have the confidence in them to 100% play that role.
So we also have the aspect of the public, the Police Complaints Authority, and we have the professional standards within the organization.
What's the difference?
That is what we continue to question. What is the difference? If it is that we are talking internal affairs, under the umbrella of internal affairs, it is not considered internal affairs. But we don't have the organization that, but we have the public standards,
Professional
Standard Bureau within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, as well as we have the Police Complaints Authority, which in the police service, where the civilians can go and come.
So we have two.
Yes. Now we have the Police Complaints Authority, which is an external body.
Which is an external body, right?
So in truth and the fact, you have three avenues for us. Two is directly involved with it, internally for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and one is an external. Right? Now,
that actually seems like it might be inefficient to the point where it undermines the process of each other.
When we have particular incidents and we have varying opinions and varying views, and then the public perception of the police complaints authorities, one has to treat with it and they understand what our internal structure is. So that is where I'm saying
the problem is, I think the other two, the internal ones, they're just kind of like, again, the perception is not there. They're just kind of brushed to the side because you don't trust the police, so you're going to trust the police. It's a tough... ironically, unless you have an internal affairs division which is hated by their fellow police officers, in which case then the public might trust IA, but that has its own... Anyway, we have Claxton Bay waiting in the line. Sorry, Claxton Bay. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Morning, caller.
Yeah, hi. Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, morning. To you and the ASP.
Morning.
You know, this thing where we talking about, you cannot say when something happens, when there is a big crime, you can't call no name and all these kind of things. That is a continual thing. That has to change because these things come like the same people doing the same set of crime all the time and getting away with it because sometimes we need to name people and shame people so that because we have a kind of crooked law that it is not balanced in this country. The law is not exactly for everybody. Because if you come by me, if that same area come by me and get a box and cocaine, my name will be up on all the papers. You understand? All the papers, everybody will know that XYZ had this set of thing right where he was living. But other people, you can't hear that. Investigation always taking place. Home invasion. It depends on who do the home invasion. You will hear the name called. Other than that, you hear an investigation taking place. That's nonsense. We reach in 2024. All these things are to change. If we know that crooked law, we change it. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I understand where the caller is coming from.
Yeah, I agree.
I hesitate to say it's not so easy, but to some extent, he does have a point. Normal criminals, they get on the press, right?
And
when I say normal, non-police accused.
However, the law, when you use the law as it is, you can only put persons' names, right, and their photos and all those things, divulge information if the person has been arrested and charged. That's the law.
And charged.
So those persons who names are placed before and presented and put to the public domain have been charged.
If police are charged,
they're
out on the press too.
They're out in the press.
Okay. I still have a comment to make on the culture thing because I think we have part of it is our fault, but I'll get to that later. To some extent, that's what Claxton Bay was also alluding to. It's a continual thing. But before I get into that, we do have to go Martin on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to the Honorable Officer, Superintendent.
Morning,
a couple of questions to this. That you, from my vantage, appears to be one of the more, should I say, law-abiding police officer. And I'm going to ask you a direct question. You were late this morning.
Yes, sir.
Were you using your blue flashing lights
to cause
havoc on the road?
I do not have the authority to use blue flashing
Fair
lights,
enough.
sir.
Because I want to bring it to your attention. We are talking about school opening and traffic. The Uriah Butler, south of the Caroni, parents have to get up 4 and 5 o'clock this morning to traverse that to come support us, Spain, go to the schools in the Presby school. And one of the things I have always been seeing and heard and have been told, a lot of the supposedly senior officer with unmarked police vehicle abuse the traffic situation, use the traffic, the blue flashing lights, to traverse, disrupt the smooth flow of the traffic. So that is one incident for schools and traffic. But the more important thing I want to switch to Mr. Sean, one of the things that we have apparently forgotten, and I want to send condolences to the Dupree family. The Kilco report, we have heard nothing on it. The Prime Minister put it under the DPP to sit on it. The man has gone to the great beyond, and I think we should hear about that now. And one of the critical things I want to know, he has been living in Trinidad for the last year or two. And it's nice to ask the police, the investigators, the DPP. They did interview him with respect to that investigation, or that investigation has been hidden due to the action of the Prime Minister. I know one of your co-hosts, Ms. Nunes, have been basically begging for that Kilco report to be investigated or released. To see who the culprits are.
Yeah.
Go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, Kola. And just so people know, she has not seen it herself. She has just been given general ideas. I don't know how, I don't want to necessarily put words in her mouth or other people's mouth, but she doesn't really know what it entails, right? So she herself is curious as to get the details. Now, ASPLE, there was another situation where a previous caller was asking about a different case. And the point is, you are not the investigating officer. You are not automatically going to be given information about.
Sometimes it's happening to keep on coming here and hearing callers, not only in this program, but other programs asking for updates on in public interest matters. Sometimes some cases need to have more public interest than some, and it's unfortunate that the organization on a whole, generally, even from a low investigative matter where you are a citizen has a matter, report something and go back to the investigator and asking for some update, he or she has challenges. This is something that we're trying to change. It's very slow in the manner in which it's supposed to be done, because this is an avenue where bringing trust and confidence and transparency in the way that we do things in the organization, we can get some public trust and confidence in some of the things that we're doing. It's very slow. It is not the perfect environment, because at the end of the day, not all matters is placed before the public domain or given particular updates on a regular basis. Some of them has to be given updates by specific agencies within the organization. For instance, when it relates to homicide, we prefer that the homicide department,
of course,
present what they can present, and it is presented through a media brief with the commissioner or the deputy commissioner, intelligence and investigations, based on bringing certain things together. Just like some of the high-profile white-collar offenses or crimes where we have different entities that you have to present those information at a particular forum. However, the public is also asking for information, because they also need to get that information in order for them to build trust and confidence within the organization. So it's something that we are working towards. It is not as clear-cut as we would like it. I too don't have all the information available to me and all these type of investigation, because investigations are not shared with everyone, because from our perspective, you also have to have the integrity of the investigation, because it's a matter before the court, so you cannot share with every police officer, not because I'm a media ambassador.
And a police officer means you
that
can.
Doesn't mean that I can just go and ask for information. There's a particular channel that we need to share.
But I think also with regards to this, because I'm not too sure to what extent I don't think it's before the courts, I could be wrong. But with regards to this situation, caller, all I'll say is this: to pray, if anybody was being protected by not ventilating the report to the public, I don't think it was Mr. Dupree. Right? I think there would have been other people who are more closely connected to the current administration or the current people in power, and vice versa to the outgoing administration before them, because I think, it could have been ventilated at any point in time within the last 10 to 15 years. I think. I could be wrong about that, though. I'm not sure when the report was finished. I can't remember, so forgive me. But the point is, it doesn't seem like any politicians are looking outside of Karen Seshera to get it publicized. So then the question we have to ask is, why The most obvious answer might not necessarily be true or 100% true is some people within society that may be involved in a situation are being protected to some degree. People that we may know of or may not know of connected to the situation, right? Probably not Mr. Dupree, and those people are probably still around, and the interconnected web might be far deeper than we know. And then on that, a case like this, I'll just say this, a case like this, it's very, very easy. We don't know what the actual regulations to govern these cases are, and we don't know what the informal, implied rules that might govern something like this, because once you get into this sphere, it gets very complicated very quickly.
And sometimes...
And I just want to say, I can see it very difficult for the police to treat this normally. Not because they don't want to, but rather because of all the extra things. And there's more, but I don't want to speculate further, but you could kind of maybe, come to those conclusions yourself, right? About obstacles in the way on cases like this.
And sometimes when you be too, you're premature in making allegations or accusations about an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Once you put somebody's name out there,
yeah,
you just can't pull it back. Once you make statements about a person's character and a person's, you make allegations of the conduct of an individual, it has serious ramifications across the board.
The only time you could pull it back is when you're a politician and your enemy decides to fall in under your camp once again. All of a sudden, they're your best friends all over again, until you fall out, in which case they were the worst commissioner of police, not too long ago they were the best. But I do want to go back to the thing about the police culture, because I do believe that the caller from Tobago is generally right, except, and I've kind of alluded to or said this directly in different times before, I think some of the issues that plague the police service are not necessarily just a police issue, but a public sector issue. Certain HR things, right? And I do wonder if it's not so much that we have an imported police culture from the global police cultural zeitgeist or what have you, but rather if some of our feelings is with regards to reporting, well, we see it in the public sector. They don't tell on each other either. Because I have my thing going for me, I don't bust your files, you don't bust mine. That is going on in city corporations, municipal corporations, in ministries, in various private, public special purpose companies. That's what goes on.
I just want to say that from where I sit, I think we have been more transparent.
Ironically, I could somewhat agree with that, yes.
Than many of the other institutions. Once an officer has been found wanting and he's charged, we ensure that that officer is taken, put before the court if it's a criminal offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just by the way, the Maruga triple homicide suspects, their names are out there.
Once it reached the court, the court is responsible now to adjudicating that matter, and the evidence presented, those individuals or individual has to have the same protection under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And if it is that when the matter has been completed, they were found guilty or not guilty based on evidence that was presented, we must accept it.
Yeah,
because that is what the court says.
To your point, those 6, they were said innocent. I can't go now and say, well, no, they're guilty. I have questions about how the case was handled, but at the end of the day, innocent is innocent.
We could all question
whether we like it or not.
We could all have conversation about process and procedures afterwards. But I'm just simply saying from this perspective, most recently, or should I say most recently, within the short period, there was an incident where a police officer assaulted a traffic warden.
Right? Wait, that wasn't recent. That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. That matter was dealt with disciplinary. PSB got involved, and that officer is on suspension.
Right? But we didn't know.
You didn't know about that.
Didn't know.
Right? There are matters that officers go on suspension. Now, if the officers go on suspension for certain offenses, disciplinary or otherwise, if it's something disciplinary, that's internal, we would not publicize disciplinary matters to the public, but there's internal.
We don't expect the banks to publicize their HR matters to us.
Exactly, so we would not do that. Those are HR internal matters.
Do we have a caller? Just Tobago's on the line. All right. We'll try and squeeze you in. Welcome back, Tobago. Morning.
Yes, Sean. I just wanted to kind of interdict real fast. I know you're about to close. For one, comparing the police to the public, I wouldn't go down that road because the public is not charged and given the powers of arrest, given a firearm, given the paramilitary training, and so forth and so forth. And it's that power.
I know.
And you have the ability to go out and make arrests. Now, to the ASP, I hear you focusing on the releasing of names, right? That's not necessarily where I'm at, right? Because I know in order to do that, you must now have this matter before the court and the person has to be charged and things of this nature. But what the public would like to see is that there's efforts being made to clean up your house. And if we're going to sit there and say my house is not dirty,
I don't think the ambassadors are saying that.
Let me just take a minute and address
30 seconds.
30 seconds and address it directly. We have never.
Thank you, caller. I'm sorry. For the interest of time, I'll do have to cut it here because we do need to close.
We do, in fact. I should say, not do in fact. We have never said that our house is not clean. We acknowledge that there are bad apples within the organization, and
some of the messaging might not come from the police service.
Sometimes,
right, that you might take issue with.
Sometimes I believe that when you hear the word the bad apples, you expect to get a list of bad apples that we identify a lot of bad apples. Sometimes we have information, we have allegations. There's nothing to prove that, there's nothing that we can substantially prove that those are bad apples, right?
Yeah.
But we have been doing it. We have had a lot of officers being arrested and put before the court. We have been addressing internally some of the challenges we have. To say that we are not cleaning up our house and acknowledging it, it's unfair to say that of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service at this point in time, but over the years we have been being very transparent when we have information and we know for a fact that we have challenges within the organization. So we are treating with it.
I think the disconnect is a lot of people experience the lower level stuff, not the outright criminal activity, but just, this officer might be lazy, like the officer with the traffic warden, stuff like that, right? That's a different kettle of fish when you get down to it. And I'll just say this, I understand, caller, why you said what you said, and to some extent, I want to agree with you, because on principle, that should be the truth. But with regards to that low level stuff, a lot of it is very similar to what you see in the public sector. Right? A lot of it. It's the public sector culture of how HR is handled, how the unions handle their business, how for lack of a better word to put it, they're still employees of the state. And some officers will understand this is a vocation, this is a calling, this is not just a 9-to-5 job where I clock in, kind of write some documents and clock out. There's a greater degree of responsibility. Not all officers do. And those are one group of the bad apples, or those are the bad apples, some of whom are corrupt and do criminal activity, some of whom they're not corrupt, they're not outright evil, they're just irresponsible. You're going to see that also around the world, and that's what I was pointing to. I see the similarities in that side of things, and as the SP said, those lower level things, those are labor things, those are internal disciplinary things. It's kind of hard to justify revealing that, right? It's not that simple. But I understand what he says, because what I said about the PCA and having an effective body, I think it goes in line with what he said. The public still would like to see more. Because
they put us, they put us at a higher level of judgment. They expect that we behave at a different level.
Yes, because ideally that's what it should be.
It should be, because the level of responsibility and the authority vested on us, we should not be behaving as the average individual on the street. So I understand that, and that is what I'll take from the caller in Tobago, that it is true that we are kept at a higher, we are put and placed at a higher standard. And if that higher standard is not met or not being viewed by the public as to that higher standard,
met by the police, viewed by the public.
Yes, met by the police, viewed by the public. Then the public perception again, and the public, their own realities that we are not being, or the trust and confidence is not there, right? So sometimes we might have to work twofold.
Yes.
Right? To get it back.
I did say, when there's a quote that I want to get to here quick. I started the show with this. When the trust account is high, communication is easy, instant, and effective. And I said the reverse is true. When the trust account is low, then communication is not easy. It's difficult. It's inefficient. It's long. Right? And to be fair to the police, they do more effort than other people. So we'll end things there. I'll just like to point out that, look, at the end of the day, as the SP Ali and others have said, police officers do come from our society. So to some extent, we do have to ask morals, values, traditions, culture. Maybe because our country is so young and we did not have a maturation process before things like the internet and globalization and mass media influencing us more directly than other countries had to deal with in the past when they were young. Maybe, all of these things, these are things we have to learn to try to overcome. I know it's not necessarily easy, it might not even necessarily be fair, but that's the reality of being an adult. We are technically an adult nation, as I said. We might still be a young adult nation, 62 years in real life, 4 years in nation lives. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? We do have to rise to the occasion because we have to be responsible for ourselves. So our police officers come from us, come from the values that we impart in our young men and women. Let's remember that as well. Thanks to all of our callers. Great discussions, good points coming out from all of you. Thanks to the ASP. I know he was challenged with traffic, but he did not use his lights and sirens to get through it, folks. Talking Point paid the price so that he upheld the true regulations. And with that said, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Make today a good day, as Mr. Shah would always say. Stay safe out there. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN. The home of Caribbean.